Hi everyone, welcome back into the studio. I'm going to talk to you a little bit and show you a quick video painting a flower using a glazing technique. Now I have some other videos on the channel here about glazing, and you can always use the little search bar and search for those videos. But I want to show you a little bit more about what is glazing. There are two types of, basically all painting techniques are broken down into two types: direct and indirect. Now, alla prima, where I work wet into wet, I sit down and I paint it all in 24 hours. That's called direct painting techniques. I'm just sitting down and I'm doing. Indirect techniques require layering of colors. And the Dutch masters, this is some paintings I did of the Dutch masters. And the Dutch masters, they would start doing different types of underpainting. Sometimes penumbra, grisaille, other types of underpainting, the grayscale, the grisaille. And they would do all kinds of, they had a Flemish technique and everything. I did these for years and years and years. I studied these, went around the world teaching them. And you would layer colors up on top. And some of those paintings would take over a year because they painted in oils. It was before acrylics. And so they had to let those layers dry before they worked on the next layer. Well, with the modern acrylics, we can do modern techniques. And so some of these that you see, these paintings I do, I'll do within just a day or so, or sometimes even in the same day. And so it's what we call an indirect technique. And so you need to use the acrylic properties to dry it. So you can, with the new modern acrylics, you can use a wet in wet alla prima, which I showed you. You could then fast dry it with a hairdryer and go right into indirect glazing techniques as well. Let me show you something about that. And they're a lot of fun. There's just a lot of very different ways you can do it. So here I have a board here. It's about 14 by 14 here. And I'm just going to paint some flowers here with you real quick. And we're going to go from a direct technique to an indirect technique, okay? So I can show you the difference here, okay? And so a lot of times with indirect techniques, I would do like a grisaille, which is a painting of a gray underneath. But I use the direct techniques. I can use a direct technique to set my flowers and then an indirect technique to alter it with glazes. So we'll show you. So first thing that I'll do is just make a nice neutral background. We've done this 1,000 times. I like to take some green, some burnt sienna here. Sometimes I make a grayish type of background. And let's add a little white to this, make it softer here. Okay, and just that'll be a pretty, it's almost like using a beige. We'll take a large brush here, add some extender medium to it this time. And let's just pull this through. And we could add water too. Take it more of a, so this dries pretty quickly. I want this all, I'm going to paint a direct technique here, but I want it to kind of dry too so I can show some indirect techniques. So we'll do a little bit of both here. So I'll put a nice light coat on there, and I like it to kind of melt out there a little bit. Let's add a little more color into this down below in here like this. This will be kind of neat. We'll keep it kind of soft. How's that? We'll keep it kind of soft here. So that we get a little interest. You know me right now in my career where I've been painting with you guys. Some of you have been with me for 30 years. You know now I'm in a part of my career where I really do like to add interest and stuff to stuff. So I like a little more warm and cool into my grounds and stuff. I just like that. So I'm going to add a little bit of both to this one here because I can. So I will here. And I want that a little softer blue. So I'll go a little more light into it. Let's just work that out a bit here. And I love these colors. I'll keep them softer. We won't do the super powerful. We'll keep this a little softer here today. And just a nice, beautiful background. And then we'll paint a couple of roses on it, and then we'll glaze them, okay? So I'm going to rinse this out because I'm going to use this big brush for glazing here in just a little bit. So now what I'll do is I'll take my brush, this is my number 10, and I'll start painting in some roses, pretty close to what I've done before. We'll do direct painting, wet into wet. We'll set up some roses, and then we'll change them. So I kind of plan, I'm going to glaze some yellows and stuff into these roses. And so I will paint a lot of white into them right now. Then we'll change them over to yellow. I'll show you how that works. But you can glaze any kind of color. So let's come in here first and we'll just set a soft yellow. We'll just take some of our blue and burnt sienna like what we had here, a soft gray, and we'll come in and just start to set a rose here. And so I'm going to start out direct. This is direct, painting it directly here, okay? And I'll go from direct to indirect, which will be dry. And you'll see the big difference. And you'll see using these as an acrylic artist, it's really nice in that painting on the same day like this, I can sit here and correct a mistake or something like that that I might have made. I can correct it right now. We'll put another smaller one there. Let's put a smaller one right out here. Maybe a different one dropping right down there. Okay. Now, direct, what I always tell you to do is we come in and we start adding some shadow color, shadow tone. So let's go in and start doing that. Okay. So I'll add some shadows in here. Let's go with a little burnt sienna, a little bit of, which is a nice soft color. Burnt sienna, and I'm just pushing in the center. You've always seen me do this with the center, so I'll come right in here and push the center. I might want to add some more later on, but I'll just do it real quick right now. And there's a lot of times that when I'm painting, you know, direct to indirect, that I do it real quick through the direct because I know my indirect, my glazes, are going to fix areas where I may have problems. So I tend to be more casual when I'm going to combine the two techniques together because I know the two techniques will soften each other. So I'm going to leave this mostly a white and pink, and we're going to change it into a yellow rose. Okay, I'll show you what we're going to do. So we'll add maybe a little bit more, make this more of a rosebud right out here. Okay. And so I do that by just pushing that into an oval. I'm just doing this pretty quickly so I can show you guys the difference between direct and indirect painting. And as an acrylic painter, an oil painter can do it too. Like an oil painter, you can start this all out with acrylic, and then if you want to finish it off with oils, that's perfectly acceptable and really great as well. So, you know, or if you want to give it time for your oils to dry, you can certainly do direct and indirect like the old Dutch masters did, but you have to let it dry up a little bit. And so, you know, which isn't hard. You just put it away for a while and depending upon how thick you made the oils and stuff, you just put it away for a while. So now let's just come in and we'll take a little green and little burnt sienna. You know, I like to do this. I like to add in some stems, some ideas of the stems in, right? We'll do this kind of quick idea of some calyx here. Idea of some calyx coming down this way, and maybe that one coming in there. And I love casual painting like this. Just putting in and just finding shapes, right? Finding the shapes. And we'll put in an idea of some leaves here. I kind of did a little sketch beforehand, but I haven't followed it at all here. So we'll just leave that for right now. But I hardly followed anything on it. But that's okay. It's mine, right? So we'll push a little bit out. But I love to do these. I love to sit down and do these. Let's push some of that dark contrast right in there. And we're just setting up. So I'm painting wet into wet right now, right? So, and that is called direct painting. Wet into wet. And in just a minute, we'll flip over to do the indirect. All right, so now what I'm going to do before I do anything more onto that is I'm going to add some of my light colors. So when you think about an indirect painting or glazing, you tend to try, when you want colors to really pop, you want to get as much white into the undercoat, at the underpainting as possible so that the colors will pop. You can always darken it down, but one of the things that indirect glazing layers can't do is really bring up light unless you make it opaque, and that just defeats the whole purpose. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start pounding on a little bit of white, especially right where I really want that to be white. And for those of you that have a problem sometimes in setting up too much white on your flowers, this is a great technique to go from direct to indirect, because you're going to be able to glaze back some of the original shadow colors back into your flowers here and get that softness that you might want to have back in there again. So but I'm watching when I'm doing this now, I'm watching the amount of white that I'm doing into the flower, because that is going to cause the reflection of my colors and stuff here. So maybe I want to push this bowl in. So this is all direct. See, I can push this in, soften that out. Let me set a little more white right in there. And so that's making this rose, this white and reddish or pinkish kind of rose here, which I'm going to turn into a yellow one and show you some differences here in just a few minutes. So we'll do this. Let's put a little light up onto this bowl, up onto this little rosebud here, and draw in a little petal. I'll even leave a few mistakes there so that we can glaze on and change it up a bit. Let's put some over here. Just put on some light, and I'll leave some mistakes here. I'll show you what glazes can do. Glazes can actually do a lot, and when you have some really good glaze colors, I'm going to add a little bit of extender. Generally, what you start to think of is, when you're working with the whites, wherever you put more white, that's where the rose will eventually, as I'm going to build this one, will be more yellow. But I'll be able to, I could do this in multiple layers and build it up even more yellow, more light. So when I paint indirect, it doesn't have to be just one time. You can do it multiple times. So let's just set that one up like this. And let's make a little bit of a mistake here. Leave that in there. Here. Put in a little more light right there. But we'll want to have some more stuff going on. This is a little too much right here, so we'll take just a bit of that out here. Softer little rose there, and a soft little one right over here. Just an idea. And a lot of this indirect, a lot of it that I tell you indirect is I can put like a white blob here, and it's the darks that actually, let's put a little bit of burnt sienna in that, those violets. So it's the darks that actually make it the rose, see? It's my dark shapes there that actually say, okay, that's kind of a rose there. So I want to change the direction of this one slightly, just a bit. And so I'm going to turn it up just a bit here, change its direction slightly. So I just redo the center there, just so it changes up a bit. But this is just to show you guys the example. We won't leave it quite so light here. We'll show you how we can change it, where we flip from basically direct painting to indirect painting. So as long as I build up some white like into the front of the flower, I'm in good shape, because the white will make my glazes show up more, okay? So I don't have to have the painting completely done, I can use this now to set this as a foundation for doing the next step, which is going to be some glazes. So what I'm going to do is stop the video here for a minute. I'm going to go grab a hairdryer. I'm going to dry this really well. And then I'm going to give this a coat of glazing medium. This is a medium that we have in the line that what it does is it is like putting a piece of glass on top of your painting. It's going to separate my lower layers from my upper layers here, and going to allow me to put a color in that will not paint out what we have there in the rows at this point. Okay, so it's called glazing. And so this is, you got to think of this as, it doesn't slow down the drying time. It's a fast drying time. So if you have a large piece, you can mix in a little extender or a little extra water, and I'll show you how I put this on. So I'll dry it, and we'll come back. I'll show you about glazing it, and then we'll come back, and then we will add the glaze color layers to the painting, okay? 1 second. Okay, welcome back. So what I did is I took my hairdryer here, and I just dried it here. It took about 5 minutes or so, depending on how thick your texture is. And you really want to make sure that texture is dry. It's the winter time here, and it's 4 degrees outside, so I can't do that. But in the summertime, I take it out and let it just bake in the sun for about 10-15 minutes and bring it back in, and everything is all nice and dry. So now you see some of the little intricacies here of the streaky color and stuff like that I like to leave. Now what I'm going to do, and you can do this as an acrylic artist at any time. If you want to protect your painting before you move on, you can do this. So I'm going to now put on a coat of glazing medium. And since it's just one small board here, I'm going to thin it down with a little bit of water. You get the best effect if you can try to put it on as thick as possible. Not thick. I don't want to say that because some of you will probably try to put it on like a lake effect. No, you don't want to do that. It's better in any type of acrylic that you use. And always remember this. This goes for varnishing and everything. It's better to put on multiple thin layers than thick layers. So if you put one layer on, you thought, hey, that looks pretty good, put another thin layer on. You can put 2 thin layers on. The more you do, the more you separate it. Have you ever put a piece of glass on something and watched how the colors travel through the glass to the light? It actually makes the painting look like it has more depth. That's what you're going to do. So I'm going to put out a little bit of glazing medium here. And if you notice it's thicker, I'm going to take a brush with some water in it, thin it out a little bit here, and I'm just going to give a coat of this over the surface. It'll go on nice and easy, just like a coat of varnish. I'm going to add just a little bit more to this. And, if you have a real big, huge surface, you could use some extender in it. There's not really a need to, because you can just thin it with water, give it a nice even coat like that. It goes on really easy. Make sure you rinse that all out of your brush, because it has binder in it, glue. It is like a urethane, so you're going to need to go clean that brush with soap and water, okay? And then I'm going to go use the hairdryer on this for a few minutes, dry this up, and we'll come back and look at the magic of glazes, okay? All right, let's do that. Okay, so that's all nice and dry now. Make sure it's not sticky. It can be a little sticky, it's okay. You can get stickiness from putting it on too thick and not giving it enough time. And so there's a difference between dry and cure. And if it feels just a little sticky, it means it's not cured enough. So you might let it sit for an hour or so and it'll be fine. But so this now feels really good. You'll notice it's all protected and stuff here. I'll let it cool down because it's a little warm from using a hairdryer. So I let it cool down. Now, one other caution about if you're doing a dark background. If you're doing a dark background, make sure your brush and your palette and stuff is really clean before you go use the glazing medium. Because if any kind of little bit of white or cloudy color is out there, the glazing medium will pick it up, suspend it, and you put it over the background, it can look cloudy. And cloudiness usually comes from a dirty brush, okay? So it is absolutely clear and when it dries. So any kind, but if there's loose paint on the surface or something like that, it'll pick it up and you can get a cloudy mark. The glazing medium will do what it's supposed to do, suspend it and make it look cloudy. It can be fixed with another glaze, no problem. Glaze a little dark over it and that'll fix it. All right, so this is cooled down. Now I'm going to take my brush and I'll show you the fun. This is where it gets really fun. We'll take a little extender and I'll put a little extender over the surface. You don't have to do this. I like to do this because this just causes my brush to slide nicely over the surface here. And I got a little bit of white right there. So we'll take that out. So it just slides really nice over the surface, really easy. I'm gonna put out a bit of glazing medium, and usually what I do is I glaze with transparent colors. Now, what's the difference? So when you look at a tube of paint and stuff here, or you can go to our website, download the information. Two colors I love to glaze with, which is Quinacridone Gold and Indian Yellow, because they are both transparent colors. And you can glaze with a yellow oxide, but a yellow oxide colors are opaque. These two are semi-transparent. So you have transparent, opaque, semi-transparent, different colors. So you'll notice that this Indian Yellow looks very similar to the Diarylide Yellow. Indian Yellow is a very, very old, looks very, very close to the Diarylide Yellow. Indian Yellow is a very, very old Dutch pigment, just like this Quinacridone Gold is, and they are transparent. And so they're really great for glazing colors, but I can glaze with any of these colors here as long as I add some glazing medium, which makes it transparent. So the glazing medium here is clear, transparent paint. That's all it is, right? And so what I'll do is take a little bit of my transparent paint, take a little bit of my Indian Yellow here, mix it up. Now I've got a semi-transparent or a transparent paint, transparent color, and wherever I take this, let's watch what happens here. I'll make that yellow, just boom, just like that. See, it's a beautiful yellow, and the more paint that I put into it, the more yellow I can bring back this rose. So this is called the glazing. So instead of mixing up a yellow, I can glaze a yellow and make a bright yellow color there if I want to. So let's just say this though. Let me just take a little bit of water in this paper towel. I can bring the highlights back, leave yellow only into the shadows. And so this is why you could do such beautiful techniques with glazes. You don't have to do all this blending. If I want more yellow, I pick up more yellow and I build more yellow down into the bowl of that color. Maybe I want to add a little Hansa. Let's add a little Hansa to it so we get a little brighter yellow out here. So see, I got a little brighter yellow, a little bit more of a yellow orange inside. I can do any of that. I can just glaze. I could glaze a little, pull out, leave some of the white on that one. Just leave some of the yellow in here. See, as I glaze over this, it's not destroying the shadow that I have here. Let me just add a little more glazing medium. It's not destroying the shadow. It's not destroying the shadow. It's just giving everything here a gentle yellow cast, a beautiful, gentle yellow cast. So this is called indirect painting here, right? Now, let's say I want to put some quinacridone in there. I love the yellows and the quinacridone gold together. Quinacridone is a deeper, richer color. So this will give me a richness, and I generally start to head towards the shadows with the quinacridone. That's where I like it. But everybody's a little different. I have some artist student friends of mine that just love to put quinacridone gold everywhere onto the painting. So the quinacridone here just really changes it up. Now, one of the things that I like to do, you don't have to do, because you can see this is beautiful. This flower is beautiful like this. I always like to do what I call sink the tint. So I consider this a tint. A tint is anything that's a transparent color going on top of stuff. Normally we think of tints as having white, but in the old days, indirect painting, you're tinting on color. You're just putting on some color in a thin wash. So tint in the word color theory can get confusing because tint would mean the addition of white, but tint is also a technique. Does that make sense? Okay. So I do like to tint and what I call sink the tint. So I will take a color like this Hansa Yellow and a little bit of my glazing medium and a little bit of my white, the white color, bring it back, and I love to paint a little light on top because I always think it looks the prettiest when light sits on top of the flower. So, and that's just what I like to do. So I like to take a little bit of white back with those colors as I'm adding that in. And you can see I can build here. I can build a little light up like that right into that flower. I can build, and I like, if I use Indian yellow down into the shadows or so, maybe a little Hansa Yellow here up into the light so it looks just a little bit different, see? And it makes a prettier flower here. And so I'm using the glazing medium and I'm just washing a little bit of that over my light side of my flowers to bring back the light. And I'm going to actually tint a shadow here. I'm going to take a little bit of my violets and my burnt sienna, and then I'm going to add some quinacridone to this and some glazing medium to this, and I'm going to reglaze my shadow right down here. So you can see that gets soft in there. And then when I do that, I like to tint some of my yellows. I never leave it with the shadow. I'm going to grab some glazing medium, some of my yellows. I like to soften into that with my other glazes. I never glaze. I never let a shadow sit on top. I like a light to sit on top of a shadow. That's how I like to do it. So see, even if I want to come in here and tint a little more shadow in here, I then come back and tint very thin some of my yellows to soften that exchange out. Sometimes I will take a little yellow, a little Indian, a little Hansa, a little white. Here, a little bit of white. Too much and we'll go opaque. And just soften it out there. Just like that. See, it makes a real pretty kind of flower and really different. Let's put a soft Indian yellow bowl right here. A little more softness to it. And it's just real pretty that way. And you're in control with the tint. So you can see I can leave this one softer, that one more color. I could take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. I do like to do what I call sink the tint or sink the glaze into the flower with a little bit of white or a little bit of light color. And see how that just adds that spark to it. So this is an indirect technique, which is really pretty, which a lot of you can add an indirect technique into your roses to get more control and stuff like that to your roses. Or say that you got your flowers, you like your roses, but they're overall too white. Then give it a coat of glaze, let that dry, and then tint back some yellows and some other colors over it. Glaze them on in an indirect technique, and then you can come back and use the tiniest little bit of lights, to give them some shape. See, I can just the tiniest little bit of light here. I can say that's a little lighter yellow petal right there and shape up that rose a little bit. I can even take some of my glaze medium, some of my darks, maybe a little bit of this one in here, and push in some more soft shadows, soft colors, and then slowly move even into, and use the glaze medium, push it onto the side of the brush here. So the glazing medium makes it more transparent. So I work that in, and I can work in some transparent shadows that look really pretty into that rose as well. See? You're in control of that. You can work that with lights, with darks. You know, from this point on, usually once I glaze, I like to start adding glazing medium to my colors. You don't have to. I just like to. So I'll start because it adds a transparency that's really pretty to your colors here. That's really, really nice. Sometimes I might want it to go a little opaque, so I don't. I'll push it off to the side here and maybe just a little bit here for some more dark or control here. Darkness there. That's really kind of neat in there. How much you do, that's all up to you. I can take some of this burnt sienna. I can add glazing medium now to this and just pull right through that and get a beautiful transparency into that movement into there. All kinds of things you do, but the glazing medium takes it from opaque color to transparent color, and you can work your colors that way as well. Let's push, let me rinse that out of there for a second. Whenever I rinse my brush, I always put it back in extender here. Let's take a little bit of our glazing medium, a little bit of our Indian yellow, maybe a touch of our Hansa, and let's push a little more yellow right into this one, right in there. That's really I love that glowy yellow color there. But you can do this. So let's say that you put your quinacridone there, lost some of your yellow. Well, see, it's dried up here already because I'm not adding any extender or stuff. And the glazing medium is made to go on and dry real fast. So I can glaze some yellow right over that quinacridone and really give it a glow, a pop to it. And so you can see how that just glazes this yellow back up over there. And you get that real pretty little glowy color there. All kinds of ways to do it. It's really a fun addition to painting is where you use the acrylic part of the painting in a indirect technique and get some of those glazes going. You know, those are real pretty. See, I could glaze that. Let's take a little yellow, little Indian yellow, right? Maybe a little Hansa into that. Mix up some glazing medium here, and that would make a pretty little, you could see the glaze or the golden color that's going, that golden green color. Real pretty little color here. It's kind of like a golden green color coming into that. And that could go right in here, soften that shadow on that one there, if I wanted to. Real pretty. So glazing is different. So you'll see lots of designs that I did for years, for 15 years. As an acrylic artist, I was a glazer like this. This is what I did for most of my paintings. I painted indirect. And then when we started coming out with more mediums, especially like the open medium, I turned into a direct painter, an alla prima painter, where I worked actually a little bit more wet into wet, but I always have this indirect that I can go back to if I feel I need to change my flowers again. Let's go back here with a little Indian yellow, a little white, a little glaze medium into that, and add another light petal right here, right on the front of that rose. See? Boom, right in there. I can add a little more of a shadow glaze of yellow right in there. Just pull right down into that. I love that. If you feel it dries a bit too much, then give it a coat of it. Let it dry, or even go use a hair dryer on it, and then come back with extender over the surface and do it again. So you can dry it, work it, try all different. Now, if I lost some of my shadow, I just go glaze that back in. A little this, a little bit of the quinacridone right there, and just glaze a little more shadow into that. And it's really kind of pretty. Let's just take some glazing medium, some of our darker reds, Mix the glazing medium up so you can glaze with these. So now I'm using basically transparent paint. And I can come in and add a little bit more, maybe a little bit of the pink down there. And like I say, I always like to sink that pink with a warm yellow. That's what I like to do. I tried all different kinds of things over the years. I like that pink going into that warmer yellow right there. Makes it pretty. That really is quite pretty right over here. We'll just glaze some of that in there, see? Makes it look like it's blended in, but it's not. It's glazed on. That's indirect painting. Let's just soften that with a little yellow. And you can put a tiny bit more white right up here onto the tip or something if you want, for that to show up a little bit more. You can glaze light blues, you can do all different kinds of stuff. But this is both a combination on these rows of direct and indirect painting. And it's really a lot of fun. Let's just tap in a little more darks into a few areas. More. I love those darks. A little contrast into that. And you got some pretty flowers. You can put some lights into those flowers. You know, I could flip right now and go right back to direct painting with some yellows, even a little glazing medium, some lighter greens, yellows, lighter greens here, and go back to my direct painting with adding some lighter colors. Let's add a little bit of burnt sienna and light here. So I can come back in here. Let's just add a little light to that right there. So when I'm not glazing it, I'm directly painting. Does that make sense? So I could add some direct painting here to bring this leaf back up if I want, or darken its shadow. It really needs, I like that darker shadow in there. So let's just make sure we get that dark in there as well. So a little bit of dark, a little bit of light, some extra marks in there. We have some of that going around in there. I love those kinds of marks here. Maybe a little bit of that right down in here. A little negative painting onto the background. There's all different kinds of techniques, guys, to make your flowers just pop. And that's what I do, is I love to try these different techniques and make them pop. Let's just add a little bit of color movement out here. I call this the little bit of the brush dance to make some of this go around out here. Yeah. Here we go. Just lighten that up. But look at the depth and stuff that it gives those flowers. So there's all kinds of things. So that is a real quick look at indirect and direct painting. So direct is wet into wet, working the lights and the shadows. What happens a lot of times to acrylic artists, especially some of you that are painting roses for the first time, your roses get too white. Well, flip it to an indirect technique. Dry it really well, give the whole thing a coat of clear glaze medium, thin it with a little water. Then come back, give it a coat of extender, and then glaze your flowers. And you can change it from, too much white, add some yellow, push it back, push some shadows back, and then restate some of those colors. I never like a shadow to sit too far up on the light, because I feel that it pushes it back too much. I like those lights, those shimmers to sit up on top. But you can do anything that you like in there. As a matter of fact, I might take a little bit of this light green here, and we'll just finish this off right in here with just a few little marks of some of this light coming out here. Maybe just a bit. I like some of that. Here, let's just give that a little bit of a vein line. I like little vein lines. The idea of little vein lines. Here we go, like that. And that's just kind of pretty. So let's that light sparkle around in there, okay? There you go. Okay, it's a lot of fun. So try some of those indirect techniques. So I have a lot of these. As a matter of fact, some of you, if you come on over to our school platform, which is free, you can go in and you can see a lot of indirect techniques. There's a free long lesson of the Dutch Masters that I put over there. I think it's 28 hours, and you'll see all of the layering, grisaille, and how you use that glazing medium to its advantage, and then you can go out and do other things, okay? All right. Thanks very much, guys. If you like the video, you want to see some more of these acrylic, wet and direct and indirect techniques, hit that like button, leave a comment down there, because that tells me, I go off of my comments. So, you know, when I put the egret up the other day, everyone said, oh, do more animals. Well, guess what I'm going to do this afternoon? I'm doing a sea otter down on off the Monterey coast. I loved going down there and watching the sea otters all the time. So I'm going to do a little sea otter this afternoon. You wanted more animals? You got it. Leave comments of the type of paintings you want to see, and I will add them to my queue that I'm painting, okay? That's how we do it here, all right? Thanks very much, guys. We appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one.